It was May of 2011, and I knew the family of the medical mission I was applying to visit. And so as a communications major, I was pretty out of place because this was a medical mission for pre-med, sports medicine, science majors, things like that. And the faculty was a nutrition professor. So they pretty much shooed me in because I had a great referral, great rapport with this lovely family. And I was going to be the liaison between the villagers, the Fijians, and our group, since my concentrations were in communication and establishing such. So prior to leaving, my roommates and friends, and a lot of my friends lived in the same apartment complex I did. We all smoked weed, a lot of it, throughout those years of college, and it was a good time. So living down the hall and up the stairs and around the corner from different groups of your close friends, it was pretty cool. It was a great experience, and some of them did not want me to leave without some goodies, and they gave me these pot brownies, and I'm not too big on eating my marijuana. I already feel a little bit out of control, like I'm on a bit of a roller coaster when I smoke it, especially if I haven't smoked that strand or particular flavor before. So I had no intention of taking pot brownies with me to like a third world South Pacific country. And so I gave them to a person I was living with at the time. And, he wasn't as popular as I was. So I kind of felt bad for him. And he's a really nice guy. And I was like, he could use these way more than because I'm not going to be here to kind of entertain him or look out for him. So I left them with him. And folks took me to the airport. And I'd done this routine before getting to LAX, the international terminal, because a year before that, I had lived in Italy for a year in Florence. And so I knew the routine of showing up at the international terminal. You'll see someone there with some insignia from our college, and they will give you like your boarding pass and, information like this envelope, like you're on the Amazing Race or something like that, which is a pretty cool experience, to be honest, and to have done it multiple times. Like, I'm really grateful, but I'm also grateful that I took advantage of these opportunities and reached out to people and was like, hey, like, can I get into this program? And applied and literally went through the process like everybody else and still got accepted. So it just goes to show, you try something new, you just reach out and ask. The worst thing, someone great taught me this actually, they can say is no. And I will just say her name is Babette. I'll leave it at that. Thank you for always teaching me that. The worst thing someone can say is no. So don't be afraid to ask. And not being afraid to ask got me on a flight to Fiji. And I remember the lead faculty I'd interviewed with, there were two families, and they were both nutrition professors, one of which they were just total opposite females. Both married and both had two kids. Both had an older daughter and younger sons. And both their kids were around the same age. But one was like this, like, really not a desperate housewife by any means. Like, she's a college professor, but she actually looked like she studied nutrition. Really cool, just wearing like long flowy dresses, brunette, looked like desperate housewife, like Cindy Crawford, model wife. And like her husband was he was okay looking. You could tell, tall, skinny skater dude. Like, someone totally would sweep her off her feet. And their kids were super down to earth. And other family, the faculty I had interviewed with, she was very rough around the edges, to say the least. And I had heard like her nutrition class was one of the hardest to take, which is kind of preposterous if you ask me. I know nutrition is very important, but when you have to pursue organic chemistry, 3-4 times, different semesters, things like that, and physics, don't make nutrition difficult. But that's who she was, and she didn't give me any problems. Seems like she actually really got along with a lot of the guys, and she was much older than the other faculty. Not much, but I would say like 15 years at least, and or maybe even just 10, but you could tell she had her kids later on in life. And her husband, they just seemed kind of reclusive. They didn't seem like very social people that you would want to go bowling with on a Friday night type thing, unless you were really trying to get your hands full. Like, both the kids wore glasses, things like that. So, and they just like seemed functional in their dysfunction, and that's the best way I could put it. But I really wasn't too concerned about that. They told us to get melatonin for the flight. So I got the melatonin, I took that, and it actually worked. I mean, granted, yeah, I had smoked weed before I got to the airport, but I didn't want to be the guy that got there and was like too stoned, like gets kicked out the program at the airport. And I also didn't want to eat an edible, which I had already left behind, and get too high. Like, if had the flight been delayed and then I'm not stoned on the plane, but I'm stoned in the terminal, and like edible highs are totally different than, just vaping or smoking. So everything worked out how it should. I slept. I think the flight was 9 or 10 hours, I think, maybe more, because it's past Hawaii, and I know Hawaii is like a 5-hour flight or 7 hours. Okay, I'm a little off, and I'm drinking my coffee right now, guys. Bear with me. So we get there, and we have to change planes at the international airport there in Fiji. I think it was Vanuatu or Savu Savu where we first stopped. And it was there that the students, we could kind of break away from the faculty family, and we actually left like the gated terminal areas because we had a good 3 hours and 4 hours. And some of us left the airport when we went to some local resorts, and me and 3 guys, which I was really grateful to kind of link up with guys that were in different fraternities. We hadn't hung out before, kind of heard about each other, and just they invited me to roll with them. Like, there's only so many people that can fit in a cab, so you're immediately kind of sectioning yourself off, and you're like, dang, who am I going to hang out with? And so I'm glad it was with them, because they were down to drink and grab some wine or whatever. So we did that at a little resort there, and then we come back to the airport, and they get a full bottle of wine, because I start to realize, even though we're changing to the Fijian currency, which is a lot less, the alcohol is very expensive unless you are enrolled in one of these all-inclusive resort things, because it's a tourist nation. Like, that's how they make their money. So these guys managed to get a bottle of wine, and that saved us a lot of money. So we actually sat in the front of the airport in the food court, and we had the bottle of wine under the table, and just in case some of our colleagues, co-eds, peers were walking by, or the faculty, they wouldn't drill us, hey, you guys are already starting to drink, you guys just came on this drink to this trip to drink and to party and stuff like that. And I mean, ultimately, you're going to study abroad in college, you want to have some crazy stories and, make some good memories. So, of course, there's that ulterior motive. But at the end of the day, you signed up for, paid for, willing to go to a place where they say, there's nothing on the itinerary that says drinking. So any little opportunity, little window we got, which we knew would be at the beginning and the end, we kind of already knew that because of how conservative and strict these faculty families were. So we get on the next plane, and we get to Vanuatu, I believe. And literally, the terminal is one room, and so it is the airport. It's just one little warehouse. I wouldn't even say it's a warehouse. It's all one story. And you're right kind of next to the plane in this little building while they're taking your luggage off and putting it in a little cart, and then they cart it in, and that's baggage claim. And one of my buddies, his bag wasn't there, so it didn't make the transition. And we were on the bus, everyone getting ready to roll for this actual 4-hour trek through the mountains in the jungle, because their cars don't go above 45 miles per hour. They have governors on them because the hills and it's an island and the mountains and things like that. So it's a safety precaution. So, it was going to be a long ride, and to not have someone's luggage, I mean, how are we going to get his stuff from the airport and things like that? So no one, not even like his fraternity brothers, volunteered when they got on the bus, and they were like, hey, like, so-and-so's bag is left or not here. They need to stay behind and deal with it. And the fact the faculty family didn't step in at that point and be like, okay, one of us needs to stay and help him deal with his luggage because that's why we're here, and to make sure the welfare of these students is taken care of. I had studied abroad in Italy a year before, literally for a year, like 3 semesters. So I kind of knew the ropes of international traveling. I had my wits about me, and I was confident in myself. And I was like, I actually drank with this kid before we, got on that last plane. So I'm going to stay. And I mean, I left it open. I wasn't like, oh yeah, I'll do it. I was like kind of expecting one of his buddies to do it, but I realized, I'm actually one of the oldest people here, and I'm fortunate enough to even be here. So it's my job to be of service in this situation. So I stayed with him, and we end up having to get a ride. Like, I think one of his bags showed up or something like that. And we end up having to ride in the back of this van that has no seats in it, and it's super small. And we actually pass the 2 buses that our peers are on, that all this other American students are on, because the little van can maneuver faster, even though it can only go up to 45, but it's smaller. And so me and him ride, and it's really uncomfortable to the point like we have to change like who's sitting Indian style and who's holding their knees to their chest type thing, because there's not even room in the back. And there's 3 other guys in the back of this van with us. Like, we're not alone. And there's 2 guys in the front seat and the passenger seat. So this was really like unorthodox. Like, we don't know these people. And what I do know about Fiji is that they didn't outlaw cannibalism until 1995. So I was already a little worried about going there, and, third world, South Pacific island. I get anxiety just from being on an island, just because it's surrounded by water. Like, I feel less anxious, on a mainland because of, I guess, civilization and society or opportunity. But water, that is not what I was birthed upon. Like, I wasn't born on a boat or in the ocean, but on dry land, as much as I would love to call myself a water baby. In any case, I was already on high alert, and to be riding in a car with strangers and this young white guy that I hardly knew, I obviously felt like I had to look out for, put me in a certain mood and let me know these faculty are kind of in over their heads, and they're a bit scared too, because obviously they brought their kids, and they kind of don't, none of us know what we're getting into. So we make it to the next town, which is the rest stop for the 2 buses as well, and it's the biggest town in between us and that airport in Levi, where we're going. And we're talking to the travel agency, the airline company, in a little office, and we're using the international phones, and we're getting a phone card and doing all this stuff to deal with his baggage situation. And we see, while he's on the phone with them and them tracking down his luggage and actually verbalizing it with him, as that's happening, the bus of our peers is arriving into the town, and it's going about half a mile down the road along this bay, but it's going into the city center. So it was like a beautiful sight, and everything kind of fell into place. So we knew his stuff was going to show up. We gave him the address to the mission where we were going, and we walked down the street and met up with them, and there was this street market, and we got to use the restroom and grab some food if you wanted, but we were cautious about that because a big thing being the South Pacific that we were warned about is parasites. But yeah, it was great to get invested and see what Fiji was like just in those like small 6-hour time frame. And we just continued on rolling out of this village that was metropolis, as rural as it was, into the jungle, and the sun starts to go down, and I start to realize how actually dark it gets in the South Pacific. And black doesn't describe it. It's a darkness you can feel on your skin, and it's because there's no light, fluorescent, ultraviolet, whatever, reflecting off of your skin for the first time in a while. And the noises that the animals were making is something, if I heard it now, I don't know if I'd be able to recognize it, or it might just put me into a comatose, because the insects in the Fijian jungle are totally different than insects in American forest and desert and things like that. So a moth flew on the bus, and that was one of the first inferences I got, that that's actually a small moth compared to what's out there, because the lights on the bus were on, and as the sun went down, and we passed these beautiful people, this big, beautiful black people, Fijians, and they wave with both their hands. It's kind of like they drop everything, and their smiles are so bright and loud. Their eyes, just the smile on their eyes, like that's an authentic smile when people smile with their eyes, like they're just so happy you're there, and they don't want to eat you or anything like that. They want to invite you and to experience you, and for you to experience them and their culture and their life, because it is unique and it is fun. It's jubilant in a way, as desolate as it might seem, and rural. It seems also very fulfilling in many aspects. So we'll call my buddy whose baggage got lost Casey. And upon arriving after this bumpy, dark trek through the jungle, we finally make it to the mission, which is what us students call it. There's always like a little nickname for every facility, house from our college, because campuses are all across the world. And this was just known as the mission. And it's sat... You could hear these ocean waves. Couldn't see much, but you knew the ocean was out there and it was close by. You could smell the water. It was beautiful. And then along the sky, you could see the silhouette of this really tall mountain behind it with this sharp peak. Jagged, largely jagged kind of skyline behind us. And the road went in between the mission and this huge thatched roof hut. Like, it looked like a hut, but it was as big as a small motel or something. Like the layout, the span of it, however many square feet, like a little motel on the side of a highway, like a little truck stop motel. Those little seedy places you find in the South. Y'all know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Or over there in the desert. Mm-hmm. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Little seedy motels. It was about that big. But it's nothing but a thatched roof. There's two little rooms, and they're like rectangular. So they, let's say it's like a rectangle cement block. They put these big ass columns made out of palm trees, and they made this huge thatched roof. And there were just two enclosed sections, and one was like a little 7-Eleven convenience store. It wasn't 7-Eleven at all. Like, there was no signage. I actually didn't even know it was like a shop for the locals to get candy and stuff, or soda pop. Until one of the last weeks I was there. And behind that was the kitchen, and then behind that it was open air, nothing but the thatch roof above us, lights, and and the roof is like vaulted by could be almost 3 stories, so it's a big building, a big edifice, and it's like half the size or length and square footage of the mission that's across the street and on this acreage, like a couple of acreages of land. So we're starving. So we immediately go up to the second story and drop our luggage off. The guys in a room with 12 bunk beds, or 6 bunk beds, 12 beds each, and then girls in a room with 6 bunk beds, 12 beds each. So there are 24 of us, and then plus the group families of 4, 2 of them 8. So that was like 32 people on this trip to Fiji, and we get in line to have dinner because we've been traveling all day, jet lag, blah, blah, blah. And you're starting to grab your plates and stuff and just trying to break the ice with people. Also, me and the 3 guys I had drank with, that included Casey, we're kind of snickering, but also we've come down from the alcohol. So it's just time to go to bed. But whatever is whatever. All of a sudden you hear this terrible, horrendous female shrieking scream. It's like bloody murder. And we look down in the line to where the scream's coming from, and she's not alone. Another couple of them are screaming. People start murmuring. It's like a fight's broken out, but nothing. No, these chicks are scattering away from a spider. And a spider doesn't even do it justice. There should be another word, because this thing was about as big with its leg span as the iMac, like the Mac screen I'm looking at right now. Like, bigger than a dinner plate, like bigger than my face, like some alien type shit. And it would run up to him and jump back and run up to him. So this Fijian man just comes up and he lunges at it and puts his chest out and his chin out. He kind of even leans over it and lets it kind of back off and scares it, and you can hear it running up these wood columns, and then you could hear it stomping on the thatch roof, and to know that it's always there, and this is our next new normal for the next 3 weeks. These are big spiders. Even while we're sitting there having dinner, if you felt a brush of wind along your foot, some of these girls would just shriek and scream like nobody's business because they thought it was one of those spiders on the table. So it became apparent, like, this whole trip is going to take mental strength for one. Like, this is not America, and we're so far from home, and not having it together is not a good place to be at that moment. So we all have dinner. It's not that difficult to call it a night, and we get back to the room, and KC unzips his luggage and immediately jumps backwards and yelps. And there's 2 bathrooms, and honestly, construction-wise, these bathrooms were big enough for them to have 2 showers and 2 toilets in them, but both of them had one, and it wasn't really shared space. It wasn't like a locker room. Like, it was kind of intimate. So we had to alternate using the restroom and stuff like that. So I kind of always like mapped out when I would jump in there. And, I've never lived with these guys before. Like, a lot of them, we went to college for 2-3 years before that, or maybe a year or 2 before that. And I'd never met them. And now we're all going to be living in the same room together. 12 of us for the next 3 weeks. But KC's luggage, when he opens it, he's got beef jerky on top of his clothes and in the top pocket. And on top of those beef jerky packets are roaches. And these roaches are like the size of iPhones. And it wasn't like thousands of them or anything like that, but it was at least like 8, and they start scattering. And so we're jumping around and we get them out the room. And actually a lot of the guys ran out of the room, and I was the one that was under the beds shooing these roaches out. And I realized that my age and experience, like, am I going to be the dad? Am I the dad of this group? But I knew I wasn't the dad. If anything, I was like the Mark Wahlberg dad in that Will Ferrell movie, like Stepdad or something, where he comes home, because the RA was we'll get into that. But me and him, I did not get along with him at all. I'm just going to say a white male, glasses, shaved bald head, like maybe he was balding, but seemed super conservative, super sheltered, meant well as long as you were like doing what he wanted you to do. And so that doesn't meaning well, in my opinion. So eventually we go to sleep, and I'm sleeping literally inside my sleeping bag, and I sleep on the bottom bunk. And KC is actually my bunkmate. And so he sleeps in the top bunk above me. And then my buddy, we'll call him Brandon. He was sleeping at the bunk bed closest to the back door, so like 4 bunks down from me, whereas I'm second in from the front door. But because of where the stairs are located on the Mission, we always came up on the back side. So the next morning, he's like, you like sat up and was screaming in your sleep. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, no one else said anything to me. And he was like, yeah, like you just sat straight up and you were screaming. And one thing that we did every morning, like clockwork, was have a little chapel service before breakfast. And so he told me that at breakfast. But one thing I made sure I started doing too, it was running, because I knew that could also help with jet lag and things like that. And I wanted to use the trip as an opportunity to get in some amount of decent shape, and like just, it wasn't a vacation, and it wasn't like I was sitting there drinking. So, and just to kind of get some alone time, and I had heard that the run to the village down the road, further down the road, and back was exactly almost like a 5K, like 3.5 miles or something. So I started doing that every morning. And I would shower while everyone else was making their way down to the little chapel service. I'd shower real quick. So I figured out like that was a little loophole. And it was right after my run. Then we go and have breakfast. And Brandon would just tell me about like how I would talk in my sleep, and I ended up telling him like he's not the first person to tell me that, because when I go on, like, I guess as I got older in my teenage years, when I go on field trips or away trips, people that shared rooms with me, especially people I didn't know, and especially when there's bunk beds around or something, but I will talk in my sleep like very, very lucidly, and it freaks people out. Like talking, if I was on a top bunk like that, there was a hand coming through the ceiling for me, things like that. And so it wasn't uncommon. I was very enthused by it, but I wasn't surprised. So they started taking us on these little excursions before we got invested with the volunteer work that we were doing, and across the bay on I guess 30-minute, 40-minute boat ride. And when you're in the middle of the South Pacific and you're doing these things with locals, and you're on a boat that's not like state of the art with 36 people, you get a little anxious, but you trust the process, and that's the adventure of it. But like if that boat capsizes for its low tide and we hit some coral reef. And by the way, when we woke up the next morning, you see this bay. The Mission sits on this bay, and the water, there's a little jetty and a dock. And you could tell the water gets deep very quickly. And I love that. I like to be able to swim without my feet touching the bottom. But I also don't like having to go out very far to do that from a shoreline. And right around the corner was actually one of the most well-known shorelines in Fiji for surf, because the water breaks miles off the shore. And if you surf, you know what that means. But it's a beautiful sight. It's all this low tide water, and then there's waves off in the distance on this almost horizon of waves, and it's amazing surf. That's amazing surf. Like, talk about a long ride in. However, it's super dangerous because of the coral reef, and as we know, like with climate change, like that stuff's super fragile. So they actually didn't even tell us that was over there. this is kind of like a well-known inside joke or something, like don't tell the students, because we know they're going to try to sneak off and surf. A lot of us coming from Malibu, California lifestyles, and these kids that I went to school with were like super well off, so a lot of them had the means to and time to surf, and they were actually really, really talented guys because they developed that gift. In any case, it was just it's a beautiful bay, and probably a mile straight across, or maybe 3/4 of a mile, was just another little village. And to walk around the bay, that would almost be like a 2-mile walk, or maybe like 2.5 miles. I remember we did it once. And there's a little dock out there, and the Fijian kids that were at the school that was less than half a mile away, some of them were there. Their parents worked on the property, or they lived close by. So those were the kids that we got to know pretty well. Or they lived in the village that was 1.5 miles away that I would run to every morning. And that first day, just to see this beautiful place, they start taking us on little excursions, and one of the first ones was out of the bay onto the ocean and onto another Fijian island. And this is where they filmed the Blue Lagoon movie, I guess in the 80s or 70s, with Brooke Shields. And it's a beautiful waterfall, but it's also where there's the international date line. And you can cross that as you make your way through the jungle. And there's another waterfall there that's not in that movie, but it's a beautiful waterfall. And of course, Brandon, they tell us don't cliff dive and things like that when we go, because if you get hurt, it's going to be a long time before there's help, and it's not worth it. I mean, we're not talented, extreme sports enthusiasts like we're college students, but we're college students, so we're going to do that shit, and they know it. So obviously they would take us to places where you could kind of bend the rules a little bit, but it really wasn't worth it. So, Brandon, cliff dives off this secluded waterfall. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I'm way too pussy to climb rocks like that, because rocks are super slippery, and that's also one thing you learn being in a place like that, like the jungle. Never, ever trust a rock. A rock might look dry, but that bitch is like an oil slick. That bitch is like a banana peel on Mario Kart. So never trust a rock. Unless it's Jesus, hey. But it was already, shaping out to be a good trip. And so I believe it was on that excursion, or one nearby that, at another site. But there was actually something weird that happened. So as we were trekking through this jungle, they tell us that we will cross over the international date line, which meant that we would be going into the future, or tomorrow, the next date, just given the location and how things were set up. But to me, it was a bigger deal than that, because one of my favorite shows of all time is Lost. And anyone that's a real fan of Lost knows in that first episode, spoiler alert, the pilot tells them, we lost contact and we tried to turn around and go to Fiji. And it has a lot to do with like conspiracy and vortexes and certain areas on the earth, and maybe this type of like a rat or something, like not like a rat, but something like a Middle Eastern demon or monster or god type thing. And I don't know. I was just super into it, and I love that show. So I was so just psyched up because I was like around it, that energy. And I don't think it was happenstance that, paranormal things like that got me excited. So we go to this little waterfall, and that resident advisor I told you about before, he had pissed me off while we were over there, because he bent down to get something, and we're all kind of like staggering on rocks or whatever, because this isn't like an ideal like oasis. Like, this is the jungle, so it's like rocks and jetties, but it's beautiful too. But you got to be, have your sea legs about you to navigate this thing and to have fun. And obviously, like, the families that were there, the faculty and their, like, younger kids, these, like, preteens are, like, kind of clinging to their parents, and their parents are like, oh, okay, well, obviously the college students are, like, going off because this is amazing. We're in the jungle, on this waterfall, and, like, this deep water we could swim in, like, blah, blah, blah. It's Fijian water, that Fiji water, baby. But the RA pissed me off because he, like, bent down in front of me, and his ass was literally, like, right in my face when I turned my head. And I found it super inconsiderate, and I was just so upset, and I was just being a diva. I'm not going to beat myself up over that, but I can see where I overreacted, and I let something so minuscule and not even a big thing that he probably didn't even realize he did happen. Or maybe he wanted to get his ass licked by me because I am a good-looking guy, and he was, trying to throw me at, throw him the back of his balls in my face, dog. Like, oh, you trying? What's up? I see how your dick's swinging. It was good, But I didn't see him as that type of character, so I got pissed off and all of my feelings, and that's how I got attention too back then. Causing a little drama, making something out of nothing, like feeling disrespected. But at the same time, I was also out of my element in a way. Not really though, because I grew up. In my summers, like Christmas breaks, I'm about to hit this Unwind Aces disposable vape pen, which is full of CBD and a little bit of THC. Anywho, my mom would send me to her mother's house, and she was actually with my mother's father, but they were never married. My grandfather at the time, after having kids with other, my cousin's grandparents, they were back together, and so I would go to St. Thomas. So I knew what it was like, island life, and like to swim in the ocean. Like, so I could, water baby for sure, but more like just like ocean baby. Like I really have a spiritual connection with nature, and especially water in the ocean. Lifeguarded in high school and a little bit in college, landed a modeling campaign about swimming and water safety with the American Red Cross. So everything's kind of like falling into place, and I get it. So I appreciate that. It's a powerful thing. It's a humbling thing. And to have let something that minuscule, like, get under my skin at that beautiful moment. And so what I got was, when it was time to go, everyone starts making that trek back. Like, obviously, the parents and the kids, they're going to leave a little bit ahead of the college students. And they're like, seriously, like, we're already leaving, so you guys have to come on. And so I end up realizing halfway through the walk, after crossing the international date line again through the jungle, that I left my shoes or my sandals there or something, because we had like water shoes. They told you to get all this stuff before we went, and I didn't have my shoes or my flip-flops, and I was like, damn, I left them there. I was so pissed off over something so stupid that I forgot some shit that I had taken there. So I stubbornly make an about face, and I kind of tell people, like, hey, I have to go back for my shoes, but I don't ask anyone to join me because pride, and I'm already pissed off. So I make my own way back to the waterfall and this beautiful watering hole, and lo and behold, my flip-flops are there. And so I grab them and I head back, and on my way back is when I see the kind of standoffish faculty advisor's husband. Like I said, her and him are much older than the other family. They're like grandparents' age, but they have a daughter that's probably like 11 or 12 years old. I say like 11, 10. And this chick, like, reminds me of Little Miss Sunshine, like just her whole demeanor, except way more awkward. Her and her dad are just kind of talking to each other, but they're looking down and they're not looking at me, and they're making their way not in a haste, but they come through these trees, all these little skinny trees and foliage, and they walk around me in this clearing, and they don't even look at me. It's like they don't even, the way they're walking, it's like they almost would have walked into me, but they naturally watching their step or something, but they have no acknowledgement in their semantics and the semiotics of their body and how they're moving, communicating that they know that I'm there. And they end up walking on by me, and it was like they came from nowhere and they went into nowhere. Like, I look back And it was like they were just gone. Like their voices were gone and they were gone in that instance. Now, when I got back to the camp, the main camp, they were there at the front, like at the little tourist spot in the front, which did not make any sense at all, unless they knew of another trail or something from the waterfall, and they forgot something and they went back. But that was weird. It was like I crossed that international date line, and I don't know if something got mixed up with the time continuum or if I double folded it or something like that. But that was a very interesting experience, and I'm really glad that I had it because I love Lost. And I had an experience on a plane in high school. I traveled to Europe over spring break, and we were flying over the Alps, the Swiss Alps. And there was a character from the show, a very pivotal character from the show on our plane. But at the time, I did not watch the show. So they said that she was on the plane, like my friends were like talking about it and stuff, but I wasn't into it. Like I was just like, oh, and she wasn't like an A-list actress at the time or anything. So I didn't know, she wasn't a familiar face to me. So we were flying over the Alps, and all of a sudden our plane starts dropping. And it was funny because my friend Lauren, we were joking, and we were like, she was always like, I like turbulence. So like when it got bumpy, she would like ride it out and like, have us laughing and shit. She's like, ooh, yeah, I like that. But that turbulence hit, and these Italians on the plane started screaming. It was like we went through like some type of air pocket or something, and we leveled off after like what seemed like eternity. It might have been like 15 seconds of like free falling. And, glasses shattering, like people crying a little bit. And I knew the movie or the show was about a plane crash. And I was like, damn, like this bitch is on the plane. We're about to fucking die. And Lauren was like, I didn't like that. And she usually likes turbulence, but she said, I ain't like that. I'll never forget that. So Lost had a good place in my heart. And so did that experience. And so we came out of there. And eventually, I don't know if that was the same day or another excursion, but they took us to these natural water slides, pretty much, which are not water slides. It's runoff water, Fijian water, that runs along these rocks, and these rocks are so slippery and smooth that humans think we should rub our asses along them and make them water slides because it runs into a little quarry that is probably like 7 feet wide, 8 feet wide, 8 feet long, and 10 feet deep. And they're surrounded by these rocks that are probably 12 feet high. And that's when I came to know AK. And I noticed her on the trip. She was one of the black girls there. Very nice, big smile. She almost looked like she had this like Barbados or Antiguan or Cameroon, just naturally just black features, and beautiful, beautiful young lady. But very nice and so smart. I knew she was a science major because I was there with a bunch of like pre-med, biology, nutrition majors, stuff like that. But she got up on this little ridge, and I was at the top of came down the water slide or whatever. And we were trying to get her to jump because we had all jumped off of it into the little quarry because it was deep or whatever, enough to jump and like cliff dive a little bit. It's nothing extreme, but it was like jumping off maybe like a high dive diving board type thing. Not even that high. Not military high dive, you know what I'm saying? So she freezes up at the top of this thing, like, and will not jump these 12 feet into this water. And she was up there for like 5 minutes, and then like the faculty that was like the chick that was standoffish, we'll call her freaking Kathy. Fat Kathy is like, okay, AK, just come on down then. We don't have time for this type shit. No, bitch, we got time for this girl to work over her little fear. Like, we're in Fiji. Ain't nobody going nowhere. Shit. And that struck a chord with me. Shortly after our arrival, we walked as a group down to the village, a mile and a half down this dirt road along the bank of this bay, this open ocean bay with mangroves and, sometimes, eventually land and grass, and then the village sat in between us and the water. And that's how we knew we were there. And nice, petite, but strong, kind of remind me of Cicely Tyson, woman approaches us and spoke very good English. And we'll call her Nala. And Nala used to be a nun, but she had returned to her village. And, the children were around us, and people were peeking out of their shanty houses, these huts that they had made from sticks and mud and clay, and, very, very rural, third world. And we introduced ourselves to her, and her and I would just, everyone was there. So we knew we didn't have time to talk then, but we knew that we would talk. And we moseyed on back and, fell into that routine of grabbing our meals 3 times a day. And, those spiders coming out the bushes or off of the thatch roof and scaring the girls. And, then them thinking something was under the table. Sometimes all of us just jumping at the table for no reason, thinking something ran across our feet. And another big thing about being there was the coconuts falling off of the trees. And these heavy-ass coconuts would just plop down, like, right next to you while you're walking along a path. And it's the gnarliest thing, because you're like, that could have killed me. But to see these Fijian kids, like, wielding machetes, and it was a beautiful thing. It really taught me a lot about how animal I am innately. And I think that's where a lot of my emotions tend to go off the hinge a little bit, or become overwhelming if I'm not being active and pursuing that animalistic drive that we all have. And I know I've certainly been born with, and my body just requires it. Like, I have to excrete these hormones and use them in a dynamic physical way in order to feel level mentally and emotionally. And that's okay. But it's difficult to maintain. So, thus, we have the autiste. In any case, yeah, Fiji's becoming just more beautiful and beautiful, but at the same time, a little bit more scary. Like, every night as the sun's setting, these big-ass bullfrogs would just appear on the pathway in between the road and the dining hut and the mission. And you just had to, like, step over them. But it's like, where did you come from? Because I've been walking around here all day. I ain't seen none of y'all. And every night, this tower, all 8 of y'all want to come out and just block the pathway right here. And, you start realizing, like, the wasps and the flies and things like that. Everything's bigger on land. And they're telling us everything in the water is poisonous. A lot of it's poisonous. And snakes that swim, they're white snakes with black stripes. And if they bite you, you're paralyzed in 3 minutes. That's it. It's over. Your lungs fill up with water. They say sea urchins, they sting you if you get brushed up against the coral in a wave, and one stings you, you're paralyzed. Your lungs are paralyzed in 3 minutes. It's over. like Jesus. Oh my God, you don't even have time to, like, tell anybody to get any help or anything. And, actually the bay that we were sitting on, I asked them what it was named after, and they said it was named after a gentleman that was skiing behind a boat out there, a Fijian guy, and he fell down while skiing, and they circled back to get him, and they could never find him, and they never found him. So it makes you wonder, was he actually... Did he fall down, or he fell and got eaten by a shark or something? Because this is the South Pacific. So getting into some of the things that happened leading up to a very climactic event, they would let us go out with them fishing at night fishing. And the first group that went during the first week, they had come back and they told me they were, like, using spears and kind of walking along the shore because it was low tide. So there's rocks and stuff, but that an octopus actually wrapped its tentacles around one of the Fijian spears on both ends and cracked it in half. An octopus cracked this man's spear in half. So they said they're going to start taking the students out on boats, and they would take us out, like, 4 at a time. So I wasn't in the first couple of groups, but then eventually, like, me, Brandon, some other guys went. I think KC was on there with us. And the guy explained how to fish barracuda. And so we went out into the middle of the bay, and he had a flashlight on his boat. And, to be out, first of all, I know sharks hunt at night. And this is a mission, and it has a school. So, like, there's people and villages around this bay, like, for miles. So if they're going to smell blood or something in the water, I know it's going to be around here. I don't know. But we were in this fishing boat, and this is the shit you do when you're on a mission trip in a third world country. You want to have this life experience. But I actually listened to the guy when he explained about barracuda fishing, and you didn't have a fishing pole at that point. You held the line in your hand, and he said you drop it down 12 meters, which is a lot. That's deep. That is deep for fishing, or, if you're really thinking about it, especially if you're holding the line in your hand. Maybe not that deep. But he, a lot of the guys just, I could tell, didn't even know how to span out 12 meters with their arm's length. So I know what my arm span is. So I would take the thing, span it out, and then I let that hook just drop. And I was sitting there, and he said, when you feel the slightest tug, pull it, because a barracuda can get the fish or get the bait off of the hook and swim away. But if you feel them eating it and you tug it, then you'll get them. I caught 4 barracuda that night. So the next day, that's what my peers, that our mission was having for lunch was grilled barracuda, because it was also the non-poisonous species. And that was pretty cool. Like, by the third one, like, they were like, no way. And I knew it. I already knew he was on, because sometimes they're so light and they're so skinny that when they start to point straight up, there's no resistance. It's like they don't even know how to swim like that. They don't know how to swim vertically. And so they're stunned. And so you can pull them, but it's like, do you even know if you're pulling anything? And sure enough, 2-3 feet long, these fish. So that was really cool. And during the day, if we weren't, doing stuff at the mission, because there really wasn't a lot going on, because there weren't any visiting doctors until the end of the 3 weeks, until like the last week and a half. So in the beginning, during the day, we would go down to the school that was the opposite direction of the village and only half a mile away. And in between there, that's where that Fijian gentleman, Siwa, he lived. And so Siwa was the guy that would scare away the big spiders, from the girls. And he'd known the college students that come there every year, and he really looked out for us. He was just a good guy. His daughter, I believe, was pregnant, and her fiance he had taken in because the villagers disowned him or something like that. And me and this guy, he was the pool guy, and I grew up being the pool guy. I was a pool operator, lifeguard, things like that. So I just made sure I always get it in with the locals. Whenever you travel abroad, the people that clean up after you, that make your meals, talk to them, get to know them. They might be nervous at first, they might not talk to you that much, but once they see you mean it, then they'll really start to open up and trust you at the end. And it's great to get feedback from them as well. So, and we'll call that kid Toby. And Toby and I would just hit it off. I don't know. I had a crush on him and I really did not have, I'm not that into, I don't find myself that attracted to black guys. And I think that just might be from, my history because of my past. But I am attracted to black guys that look like him, apparently, because he's a good looking guy. And we would just hit it off, and it would just be me and him, and I'd be talking to him while he work. And, but anyway, during the day when I wasn't doing that, I was down at the school with everybody else. And since they were all sports med people, they were running these soccer drills, because soccer is the international sport, something we could all relate with the kids. Well, I was not about that life, because if 30 people or 18 people are focusing on soccer at this third world school, there's a lot of problems not being acknowledged that can be resolved with the skills that we all have as young collegiates. And so I just wasn't having it. Like, I had played soccer in Italy. Like, I knew I was a good soccer player, things like that. But I wanted to focus on something else because something was amiss. There was a lot amiss and I didn't really understand what their schooling was like. But where we were, it had all ages of kids. So you would see toddlers, infants in the nursery across the street along the dirt road, away from the water side. There was the big school, and there was a building where all the children slept. And you saw kids from toddler age through middle school were sleeping there. So it was like a boarding school, and that's what was explained to us, that these kids leave their parents' villages to get an education. And that's something beautiful, because there's a lot more kids in that area. And not all of them get to go to school like that. So their parents are working and paying, and they are spending their time away from them. So my heart really went out to these kids. It's not like an orphanage, but definitely not like your typical boarding school either, where all your needs are met and everything is kind of like up to par. Like the sewage and things like that had to get fixed routinely. And something about living by the mission, this lovely family that granted me the privilege of going there, because they established clean running water for the mission, they also established it for the village down the street from them and the school down the street from them the other way. So we were actually out there one day. Brandon was working, I was working with him with some two Fijian guys, and we had dug up a water pipe, a main. And I just saw Brandon hoist his shovel with both hands in between his head, because I'm standing behind him, and down. And he stabs it, and you see water spewing up, and then it kind of dies down because it's flooding into this moat and this ditch that we've dug out around this pipe. And that's the running water for these kids' school. And so someone's got to yell down to the mission, and they have to send word while they're running and turn off the main pipe. And it was really embarrassing, because it was like you just literally fucked up the fresh water these kids had. And they literally, this is a place that just got toilets 3 years ago. So we were there to teach them about diabetes, because a lot of the female population there, they eat a lot of, I think it's kava root, some type of potato-like root that grows. And a lot of them were getting diabetes, and you'll notice that a lot of the females in Fiji are much bigger. I mean, they look like American black females, a lot of them, because they're, our diet and our lifestyles lead us to being overweight, but also just big people. We're already tall, muscular, strong bone build. So then you put that weight on a woman, and it's very powerful. Black women, I think, are very powerful. And in Fiji, it's also a defense mechanism, because a lot of times with their conservative society, women, the way that sex goes down is that they're walking home and they might be alone on a road, and they get pushed into the bushes, and that's customary. How these guys have sex is raping them. So to have somebody in that girth is a good thing, but it was leading to diabetes. So we were teaching them in units and groups, lectures, activities, workshops on diabetes and how insulin works and diet and things like that. But while it was recess and soccer time was being run in those drills, I had wandered into the library, and the principal, probably one of the nicest individuals I've ever met. Genuinely nice, his aura, you could tell, not a pedophile, genuinely someone you can trust with your kids. And he and his own family lived on the property, his kids were school age. And he let me take a little tour of the facilities and the library. He was like, this is the library. And all the shelves were empty, and there were just boxes of books, 5 big moving boxes full of books. Dust and dirt, hardly anything was in there. And I was like, I want to work in the library and I want to arrange those books for you guys and we'll catalog it and we're going to make you guys a library. And so we got a notebook and he introduced me to the librarian who he led from her little hut on the property. And she had one kid on her hip and another one that was like just doing any and everything around her, like climbing up trees. He had dried snot running down his nose, this big afro that was like sun scorched, so it was like red and light brown. He was like a black little Tarzan, like 3 years old, 4 years old, but he could like hang upside down, like he could do pull-ups like nobody's business, like a fucking Marine. And it was cool, and her name was Love. He said her name in Fijian, but when he translated it to me in English, he's like, her name is Love. That's what her name means in Fijian. And I was like, okay. He's like, so this is who you're going to be working with. So we didn't talk a lot, me and her, because, we didn't want to give any rumors or anything like that. But, she had her kids, and at the same time, I wanted to make sure the time I was spending there, the couple hours a day I was there, we're actually getting work done. So we took the books out the boxes and cataloged them and do a Dewey Decimal. We alphabetized them, and then I cataloged them. And, by the end of those 3 weeks, those kids had a library at that school. So that's why I'm passionate about my nonprofit project, The Thread, because if, you or any type of small business or bookstore that might be going out of business because of the electronic establishment that we are currently invested in, you can send me your books. Just email me at earth without the A, NPO as a nonprofit organization at outlook.com. And we could talk about getting your books donated to The Thread, because what I want to do is actually take them back to Fiji and keep building those kids' library and eventually establish more libraries that will serve as community resource centers as well, especially during crisis or, natural disasters, or maybe when there's a time of vaccinations or an epidemic, makeshift urgent care hospital type place. But that's the goal for The Thread. So if you're friends with me on Facebook, you can see the page there, or just email me, earthnpo@outlook.com. I'll get you some more information, and I would definitely take your books as long as we can get a donation, so I have the means to store them until we take them to where they belong, which is in the hands of third-world children. Yeah, sleep on that tonight. That's how I go to bed every night, wondering, what more can I do for these kids in Fiji that I left? So that was cool. And every day I was in the library working with Love. But what ended up happening, two major things. One, this really hot doctor showed up. Like 5 specialist eye doctors showed up from like Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, Orange County. And one of them had the same first name as me. And big guy. And not like a Brad Pitt looking one, like more like a Vin Diesel look. And I was just smitten. Like, I'd been in the jungle for already 2 weeks at that point. Ain't none of these brothers I'm around, fucking. And you bring this older doctor. And we got the same name. And I've been running for 2 weeks at that point in this 100% humidity with like 94 degree weather every morning. So I was looking, even the Fijian girls, they were like, oh, you're looking strong. You're looking good. All this stuff. Like, I was like, thank you. Stop. Don't stop. Don't fucking stop. Keep telling me. No, I'm playing. So he shows up. They live in a house that is constructed like a guest house, beautiful, like obviously like 5-6 bedrooms probably, next to our little dining hut, so closer to the water, across the way from the mission, half a quarter mile, so like an eighth of a mile down the little dirt road. So there is this well-known trip or hike up the volcano behind the mission every year. And before you go on the trip, these students, everyone kind of talks about it. And it's something you kind of want to do because you're there. It's like, as human beings, you see this mountain, let's conquer it. But we did not anticipate how strenuous and difficult it would be. And we also didn't hear the horror stories about how students had gotten lost and then it actually started to thunderstorm and rain while they were up there during the afternoon. So then it got dark and a couple of them were lost on the mountain. And they said it was going to be a 3-mile hike up and back. 3 miles. 3 miles vertical. And they gave about 6 of the guys that were with us, 3 of the guys that were with us machetes because there was no trail. We would have to forge our way through this jungle in Fiji. And have to being this is a group activity. So we start doing it, and thank goodness for the guys with the machetes. We're very enthusiastic about it, very Lost Boys or Lord of the Flies with it. But it's like we're grabbing vines and I'm digging my feet into the mud and there's worms and there's big ass ants and I'm not really looking at whatever else there might be because if I do, I might freak out. And it's a climb. It is a climb. Like for a good first 30, 40 minutes walking into it, it's just a nice hike. And then you notice how big the leaves are on like plants that look like, what you water at home on your front porch. But now these plants are bigger than your whole torso. And I feel like I'm in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And so after about an hour and a half of straight up rock climbing, mud climbing, mountain climbing, we get to what looks like a plateau or a peak. And I'm grateful. It's hot out. It could have been much worse, could have gone longer, but we made it. And I still got energy to get off this bitch. Like, okay. But that was tough. Like, that was enduring. So we all take a picture at the top of this volcano that's inactive. It's like a mountain or a big ass hill. I don't know. But it's overlooking the other side of the bay, and it's a beautiful sight. And we could see across to that other Fijian island that we had cliff dived and water slided on. And I remember being up there, and there was this big ass spider, like the one that was down there where we ate. And he was just chilling in his web. And it was probably about like 15 yards away. And so he wasn't bothering us, we weren't bothering him. And to be with something that big that would normally like terrify me in his territory, but nothing on land in Fiji is poisonous. I keep saying that because that's what I was told and that's what I believe. Because eventually, I would be cleaning up that school building and with a paint chipper or scraper, scraping off wasp nests, and these huge, like 2-inch long wasps would be swarming around me, but they don't sting you because they haven't had to adapt or evolve to defend themselves like that. But so that was interesting. And so we start to make our way back down, and human nature, when you're traveling, it really comes out, especially when a lot of amenities and resources are taken away. As Americans, we get really nasty, and I'm not ashamed to say that because I do it as well. But I also try to navigate in those situations socially through calm and collected communication. I think, unless you piss me off, and then I kirk out. But yeah, I'm not going to go into how I've kirked out before because I will weigh the pros and the cons of is it worth even going into pit bull verbal attack mode. And most of the time people come after me and they're like, oh, you shouldn't have said that and stuff, where sometimes it's so bad no one says anything to me and they're like, damn, like he is fucking pissed. Because I don't fight in the street and stuff like that. I don't get but it's the verbal communication and somebody tell me I can't do something or what I am, and I will defend myself. And maybe that's why I want to go to law school. So it's kind of like an innate argumentative feature of mine for survival. If anyone's interested in a partner that likes to argue, I'm down with that. Yeah. Like, some of my best relationships with friends are the people I could, like, argue with constantly. And if you didn't know us, you'd be like, damn, like, how the fuck are y'all hanging out right now? Like, all y'all do is argue, but this is, like, how we talk. But maybe, I don't know, maybe that's a bad habit. In any case, so yeah, it's time to make our way back down the volcano. And most of these people, especially the guys with the machete, start just kind of free diving down this bitch. I don't even know how to call it. They're like moonwalking, like lunging, jumping, like taking space jumps, leaps and bounds down the trail that we had came off of. And I was just like, damn, like, y'all just really kind of left us up here, but everyone was hungry too. And it was after lunchtime. And it was already the afternoon, but there was really no rush because there was not any inclement weather. It was just, like, super kind of inconsiderate. Like, you could see where people's loyalties lied. Where they lied. You would think that would be a word. Anyway. It's about 7 of us at the top, like the slow, like, I'm not gonna fucking try to race you down this big ass mountain. Like, it was an hour and a half up this bitch. It might be 2 hours getting down, but obviously not with y'all, because y'all want to run down the motherfucking hill. Like, we're not in the jungle and shit. Like, no, y'all can act like children if you want. So I let them go. And us, the cool kids, are up top, including Brandon. KC's ass, I think, had a fucking machete, so he was down with them. So I'm starting to go down, and I got like 5 people behind me. And there's, we'll call him Mustard, another black guy, tall, skinny, okay looking, not my type, but I thought he was pretty effeminate, but not gay. Just very well-to-do, made a name for himself, has a hell of a story, which a lot of black people I went to college with do. Because the college I went to was predominantly, mostly white. So unless they were like, if they were not from Africa or some international country, if they were from America, then we had fucking crazy-ass stories, which is why we went to that school. Because that's the only way you could get in, was saying, I overcame this shit. So I related to him on that. And then his fraternity brother was there, and we'll call him Tonio. And he's a good-looking guy. They both have kind of like the same skinny, tall body type, a little bit taller than me, so like 6'1", probably 6'2". He's got green eyes, and he's Latino. So they're not the most like masculine guys to be at the top of a volcano with. Nice guys, beautiful looking people, but I've lived in Italy like ruggedly, nomadically on my own for a year while studying abroad, and a couple of years before that. So I'm like, I don't really count on them. I don't expect much out of them. Like, I just hope they just don't get hurt. So, and then there's Brandon and the girl that he had been talking to, and she was super chill. Like, she was one of the boys, but her and Brandon was hooking up. Like, I love her to this day. And if she knows who she is, if she's listening to this. But, yes, oh my gosh. And she's such a badass. She's like a female student athlete at NCAA school. And her and Brandon are just like smitten with each other and like all lovey-dovey the whole trip. And niggas was hating because it was like, while you was sleeping, the motherfuckers was fucking somewhere. It could have been next to you, but my ass was too busy sleep talking and walking to be peeping Tom. In any case, so also AK is up there, and I hear her, as the last one, start to turn and come back down. And the only saving grace, the peace of mind for this whole little trek up the mountain, is that Siwa, the local Fijian, the dad, matriarch of this Fijian family that lives down the street from the mission, is with us. And so that's okay. He's the only Fijian with us. Like, it's not like these Fijians were lining up like, yeah, I'll go on that 3-mile fucking hike with y'all. Like, no, like it had to be a good person. Like, okay, I will take the American students up there. But he also was with the bulk of the group, which Made sense. Okay. So he was kind of already down the trail, and AK turns, and I see her through the foliage slip and slide. And it's like almost like she just fell on her butt and her feet are straight out and something pulled her down the mountain. That's how it looked, like something out of Matilda. And then she just stopped. And I was like, okay, well, that wasn't that bad. It was that took like a few seconds to happen, which is kind of weird. But so we're like the dust is kind of settling, and Brandon's girl goes back up there and she's like, hey, like, AK's stuck. And we're like, what are you talking about? And she's like, she can't get up. So I go back up there. The other guys are looking at me like, oh, shit. And this is the root. Her foot perfectly slipped under this root, and it just got too big, her leg, her thigh. And that's what stopped her from falling the rest of the way down this fucking volcano. Because it had her buckled in to the mountain, to this cliffside. And so I got behind her, and I grabbed her under her armpits, and, I explained to her what I was doing and shit, and we just got real intimate real quick as I straddled her. And I dug my feet down, and I lifted back, and, I'd been running every day, and I felt like I was in good shape and shit, and I couldn't pull her out. I did it a few times. I didn't want to hurt her. And so by then they had gotten Siwa's attention, and he comes back up and he does the same thing. And then he takes me to the side. Doesn't take any other guy to the side. And it's three of us now at the top of this mountain, and the crowd is like down the mountain. Like, it's just echoes and murmurs, maybe, if anything, that we're hearing of the rest of the group. Like, they do not give a fuck that their colleague has fallen. And so he's like, I'm gonna have to cut the route, and I'm gonna need you to hold her. And it's very few times in my life that someone is taking me to the side, and if someone does take me to the side, it's usually a man, and it's because we are in danger and you're the biggest one out here. Like, that's it. So I don't really get the option to like being a pussy in certain things. Like, in Italy, I remember this chick, she was making out with this Italian guy at the club. And like, this was when I was in high school, and the faculty family with us was walking us back to the hotel. This was on Amalfi Coast, and the guy would not leave her alone, and he was following us. And so my faculty, he was called Professor too, he pulled me back, and he's like, I need you to help me get rid of this guy. And so we put our foot down, we stopped and turned around in unison, and we were like, stop following us. Like, she's not interested. No. Like, and we had to explain to the girls, like, making out with a guy in Italy, like, that means you're going to fucking go home with him. Like, that's a big deal over there. So that's the first time I kind of got led on to the fact, like, if somebody takes me to the side and it's a man, like, this is life or death. Like, and it's not our life, it's someone else's life. So we got to talk about it, plan it out, and it turns out most of the time they're female, which is fine. I'm fine with that. Just, I don't want to be married to it. I had enough anxiety as it is. So I straddle her again. I get behind her. I dig my feet into this decline. I try to lift her up, and by now I've hooked my elbows under her armpits, so it's not like a grab. It's more like a bodily hook, so I can leverage and use my whole torso to just lift her and lean her out a bit, and also block her face with my forearm, because now Siwa is hacking a machete at her thigh, and we're hoping he can do it just enough till we break this strong-ass root that is probably older than all of us, or it's just doesn't cut her. So he gets it. I mean, hack, and it breaks free. I get from behind her. We both give her a hand up. She stands up. We're like, all right. And she falls right back down. And thank goodness she fell backwards. And so we stand her back up, and she falls right back down, and she says, "I cannot feel my leg." Like, what are you talking about? She's like, "I can't feel my leg." And I feel her leg on my right, and that one's like running warm. That's fine. But her one on her left, that was under that root, I feel it. And it doesn't look swollen, but it definitely looks like cold. Like plump, tight around the skin, and cold. It was cold to touch. So Seawall takes me to the side again, and he tells me we are going to have to carry her down this mountain, and it's not going to be easy. And that is when I realized this was not going to be easy. And he didn't tell any of the other guys. They knew what we had to do. And she legitimately just couldn't feel her leg. I did not see any reflexes. We were there with sports med students. We ran some initial little preliminary reflexology tests and nothing. And it was cold to touch. And I was literally freaking out mildly, because maybe moderately, because it was cold to touch. And that scared me. So Siwa puts her on his back, and I am leading him. So he's oftentimes got his hand on my shoulder while the others clear the way for us and give us hands and steady us where we need to be steadied. And after even this 30 minutes of this, he's drenched in sweat. We trade off, and I start carrying her. And he won't have it. He doesn't trust me. He knows my footing is American. He's Fijian. He's navigated the jungles his whole life. His feet are bigger than mine. Things like that. Like, he's just made for this more so. And he literally would take 2 minutes, and we would go 10 yards, and I would carefully be walking so I didn't slip and get hurt, but at the same time she didn't. But it's also 100% humidity. It's hot outside. And we were already exhausted. And he would just take her back, and I would help him and steady the way. And we just slowly, and there were times where she would have to get off his back because it was too steep or rocky or muddy. And she slid like where there was mucked up mud and these long ass worms and these big ass ants and just things you don't really want near, while she's wearing shorts. Like, you wouldn't be sliding through dirt in Fiji, you get some parasite. Nobody wants that. But we were doing what we had to do to get out of there. 1, before the sun went down, and 2, to get her to a professional medical facility as soon as possible if she was in fact paralyzed. And it was enduring. What took an hour, for maybe an hour, 25, 30 minutes to get up, took around 2.5 hours to get down. And slowly but surely carrying her, helping her, dragging her, letting her slide, carrying her, clearing the way. And I'm thankful for those 4 people that actually stayed and helped her down that mountain, 5, including Siwa, who literally carried her. And then once we got to the clearing where I started to see those house plants that look like, gigantic size, like Honey, I Shrunk My Kids made me feel, I realized, okay, this is where we had already been walking for 30 minutes. So if I run this, then I'm only a mile away, and this is all kind of steady, even though we're still in the thick of the jungle, and I've been running every morning. But by now, I had been exhausting myself for the last 4 hours, and I started on empty, and I just started praying while I was running because I was so concerned about her. I was concerned about Siwa, and I had to only have been running for 4 or 5 minutes when my body was just like, you gotta stop, you gotta walk, or else you're gonna collapse. And so I started walking. I was so angry with myself, but I just kept praying to God and praying to God, like, give me the energy again, give me the energy again. And so I would just run for like 30 seconds and then stop and run and stop and run, and like not just stop, but like walking, but not as fast, because everything just seemed to be going so slow at that point. Like, everything was taking so much longer than it should have. And I finally heard people chattering at the mission and people going on about their day and talking about dinner and oh my God, while they're colleague was stranded in the jungle with 5-6 more of us. And they had no concern. They hadn't even told the faculty. No one was on that road to meet me. No one was coming back for us. So I ran past the mission across the street to that little corner shop, and there was a truck there, and it had it covered. It was like almost like an old covered wagon, except it's like a little U-Haul truck. And I asked the guy whose name was Moses, I was like, can you help us go out there? He was like, yeah. And I jump in the front, and he starts riding on the dirt road past the mission, and I'm just mean mugging the fuck out of these people that are looking like me. Like, why the fuck is he in the front of some truck of some Fijian? Because I'm doing what you motherfuckers should have been doing 2 hours ago, which was helping us get out them damn woods. You know what I'm saying? And we meet them right where the truck actually couldn't have driven anymore. They were just now coming out of that clearing. And we all piled onto the back bed of it that had 2 like bleacher seat benches running along the panel sides over the wheels. And Akemi sat in the middle on the ground on the bed of the truck. And I was just praying, and I was shaking. My body was so exhausted and dehydrated and in shock and adrenaline. I was praying for her leg and praying for her recovery. And everyone just seemed to kind of like just blow it off. Like, not everyone that I was with, like they felt the severity of my concern, but everyone else that was there, they thought that she was faking it and things like that. And even if she was mentally unable to move her leg because of some type of psychosis, that's still a medical emergency. And it does not deserve a rendered judgment, especially from scientists. So that was really disappointing, these future doctors and sports med people. And she was black. And the only people that stayed with her were people of color, except for one white guy, which was Brandon. So, go figure. Because his girl ain't white. I love her, but she ain't white. That's okay. It ain't like she gotta be white. I'm just saying, if y'all got that from the story, I didn't mean to imply that. So, white people, y'all need to step up. When niggas are in trouble, y'all need to help us. Because then we won't be niggas no more. We'll be like y'all. Literally a black female, smart, educated. She was not, AK is not ratchet. Like, she's literally, I think, married to an Asian guy right now. I love her. And me and her had a special bond after that, because you carry somebody off a volcano when they're in crisis, yeah, y'all gonna talk for the rest of y'all days. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not saying we talk to each other all the time, nothing like that, but we share that common experience, like, and that's why I'm okay sharing this story. So after that, my respect level for the faculty that was there dropped immensely. I was also establishing great rapport with the village I had been running to every morning. But towards the last couple of weeks, I had rounded a bend on that road in the morning, and there was this horse covered in mud that was dead on the road, and there was this little tractor with a rope around its neck pulling the horse out of this pit of mud, or almost like quicksand that was in the middle of the road. And for one, like, I guess even now, just realizing that could have been me falling in that puddle of mud had I thought it was just a puddle. 2, that was big enough for a horse to fall in, and the horse died. And then I just happened to run around the corner and, like, literally up on it. And that kind of scarred me a little bit, but maybe it was an omen, because during that time, too, I became very interested in the doctor who shared the first name as me, and he actually wanted to go on a run with me one morning after he noticed I was the guy that ran every morning. And we did. And he was like, so how was the run? Like in the beginning. And I was like, well, it's just really slow. And he's like, oh, like slow enough so where we can talk. And I was like, yeah. So we actually like chatted it up on the run, and just really helped me not feel like such an outcaster, and taught me a lot. Like, he really pushed me to get my doctorate, even though I didn't plan on practicing medicine. and we were talking about weight and people in America being overweight, and obviously we were there. He was there to fix people's vision because a lot of them have cataracts, whereas some of them were there because of diabetes, like the nutrition faculty. So to hear him explain to me, as people grow up and life changes, our habits change. So I should not judge them based on their weight gain, because now that is like speaking volumes to me, because I'm about to be 30 years old and I'm definitely not where I want to be weight-wise. And I'm not even that overweight, but I feel like people expect so much of me that I expect a lot more of myself. And to come to realize that I'm older, and my lifestyle, I'm allowing to slow down. I'm not implicating a lot more self-discipline that I should. So these are the results that I get, and I cannot knock people that are even bigger than me, way more, overweight, because that's just, I relate to that. Like, it's totally me. And maybe it's all of us, just in different ways. And how I project it comes out in my diet and exercise regimen, and why I do and don't on certain days, things like that. So ultimately, I'm really glad for that run, and it's one of those runs where you just don't forget it, because one, he was so in shape, and for it to be a good workout for him, and we talked the whole time, which was a workout in itself, but we also kept a pace, and something about keeping that steady rhythm with someone for more than 2 minutes is something spiritual about it. So that happened, and I established a connection with Nala, that nun, but she was also the village elder. That's what they called her in the village, the elder, because she had gone out and become a nun, and then she invited me over to her house, and we actually walked down that road I would run on, and I sang to her. I sang "His Eyes on the Sparrow." And she said this compliment, how people have told me compliments before when I sing, especially like covers of popular songs. And it's, I like the way you sang that. I like the way you sang that song. And it's okay. I take that compliment. I accept that, because it's not, damn boy, you can sing. It's not, wow. It's very spot on. It's like, I like the way you sang that song, because that's what I try to do. And I guess that to me is the magic of songwriting, when you write your own song and to sing it in a certain way that you feel like it always was. But now you get to do it, and you be the first one to discover it, so you set the precedent. Whereas when singing, a cover song or some gospel song, that precedent's been set, so anything you do that's outside of the normal arrangement is either impressive or a fluke. And so for it not to be a fluke, I guess, is the huge compliment. But her residence, is beautiful. It was in the back of her village, and there's a little creek that runs between it and the road, and the path, you step down from the road on the path, and that's where she took off her shoes, I think her flip-flops, and I did, and she's like, no, your feet are too tender. And I was like, no, like, I really want to do this barefoot. Like, I know it's a risk, because I could get poked with something and get a parasite, and my feet are very tender, whereas Fijian people, like, their feet are much wider and bigger. But I took that risk because I wanted to. And I felt like I was on holy ground. And I went into her house, and which could have been seen as kind of scandalous, her taking me, this black guy from America, into her home. But she was so well established, and I think our rapport with the neighborhood, that we could let those rumors fly and know they're not true. And they're not, because she was maybe old as my mother. But she sat down, she went in her room and changed, and her house was so clean and so open. And we sat in the middle of her room, and she gave me this fruit, and I don't usually eat fruit. I'm not a fruit guy. I don't like the texture of like soft, sweet stuff, gushy. but maybe my taste buds have changed or something. But I definitely, when she offered, I took her up on it. I don't know if it was like papaya or guava or something, but melon. We enjoyed that. And she told me about how she had a vision with Jesus. And that's what actually made her leave being a nun, because of this vision that she had. It was so intense. And she said that she met him or saw him sitting by a tree and sat down with him. And she told me that his eyes were green like mine. And I didn't take that lightly. I don't take that lightly. Because, like I said, we were there like April, May 2011. So, I later went back, and we had gone to their village in the evening as a group for a little ceremony, festival party. They put on a little dance for us, their traditional thing from their village. And on the way out, walking down the little pathways to the road, you heard Casey and Brandon talking to some of the villagers about coming back to drink kava root, which gets you like a psychedelic trip, which is very customary there, and something we had done a little bit under the supervision of the faculty family on one of our little weekend excursions to a resort in Fiji. But other than that, they really prohibited it because there was some rumor that Pepperdine student went out and drank with them without anybody else there and got into an argument with the Fijian and ended up getting killed because they were all like tweaking out or something on this kava root, which I find false. I think it's just an urban legend. I don't know. But it cannot hurt to know that these things are possible. Sorry for sounding so robotic there. Ultimately, that conversation did happen. However, my friends, was not in part of that conversation because it was happening as we were walking away from the village back through a thunderstorm on this dirt road in the jungle, a mile and a half, during a thunderstorm in the South Pacific, by the way. And the raindrops, you thought the bugs were big and the leaves and trees were big. The raindrops are fucking huge. I, once again, forgot something. I forgot my flashlight. So I tell people no one's down to stay behind with me. And I just turn around and I'm wearing, regular khakis and like a button-down shirt, I think, underneath. And then khaki or a poncho, plastic bag, pretty much. And I go back to the little hut we were in and I get my flashlight and everyone's gone, like down the road. And the villagers are like moseying back to their huts. And, for a place that just outlawed cannibalism in 1995 and who knows what kind of spiritual practices they have, like, it's kind of risky for me to just be there, like, with no one else around. And I walked through the jungle but I had run that road every morning. But to be walking through it at night during a thunderstorm, like thunder and lightning, big-ass raindrops, things like that, it was dark. It was messed up. Like, I just felt like I got left behind or whatever, but whatever. I'm a big boy. So when it came to one of our last nights there, probably like 3 nights from our last night there, it was the night where we said that we were going to, hang out with them. But I think it was actually the next night. But the thing is, it didn't go down how they thought it went down. And so what actually happened is that they heard a conversation, the RA did, the nerdy guy, but the contents of the conversation, the planning didn't happen. So we didn't go back to that village ever, at all. We did not drink kava root there. So we were playing Mafia, and actually the doctor with the same name as me and one of the female doctors he was there with, who I thought was his girlfriend, but I found out on that run was not his girlfriend. We all are playing Mafia, and then like slowly one by one, like me, Brandon, KC, another dude there that, drank wine with us at the first airport, that, just part of our circle, the guys, we're like, yeah, we're gonna kind of peel off and the RA starts following us. And he's following us all around the compound. And, like, we even go out and, like, oh, we're going to go kayaking. We're going to go fishing. He's like, no, guys. Like, nope. Don't want anybody going out on the ocean at night. Blah, blah, blah. And we're like, dude, I start cussing him out. I'm just like, fuck off. Like, I've never had a babysitter. I do not need you walking me around. Like, I haven't had a babysitter since I was 9 years old. Been staying home by myself since I was 9, homie. Like, who the fuck do you think you are walking me around, following me, blah, blah, blah. So my buddy's like, telling me to calm down. They're like, dude, we just got to split up. Like, you can't follow us off. We split up. So eventually, like, we just all split up. And we meet at where we went. And I'm not going to say where we went. But we were there, and we were chilling, and we actually did drink some kava. But then we, one by one, trickled back to the mission, and the last three of us, me, Brandon, and the other guy that had been part of our group before, I'm not going to say his name, but one thing we decided, we were like, stick to our own story. Because one, KC could not get in trouble because of a lot of reasons, but we weren't going to let him get in trouble, so we let him kind of make his way around back to the mission. And Brandon and I were just kind of like, fuck it, like, we were kind of the renegades of the group, and we both come from, like, I don't know. Anyway, I'm an only child. He's got a bunch of brothers or some shit, sisters, and we just connected, and I don't count that as happenstance, but I also think there's a darkness to it because there's some pain in our lives that we both mutually experience, not at the same time or anything, but in our own way. And maybe that's why we related, because when we got back after this trip, we ended up being really good friends. But yeah, I witnessed some shit. Yeah, anyway, that's a different story for a different day. Maybe one day we'll talk to him on the podcast. So yeah, we're walking back after actually hanging out with some Fijians and doing what we said we were going to do, but not where we said we were going to do it or who we said we were going to do it with. And we actually, yeah. So, get back, and I'm just kind of picking and choosing what to tell because all of this is like, I've changed the names, and probably I know some of the facts aren't as sturdy because it's been a while. Like, that was 2011, it's 2019, and I've done a lot of shit since then, but the facts remain. And so when I stepped back to the mission, we were on the road in between the little corner store and the yard in front of the mission, and there is this standoffish faculty, the older one, and the two RAs, the male and the girl. I don't know what the fuck the girl was doing out there because we were all guys, but they all got together, and she was like, oh yeah, you just going down the street to get a little messed up? Bitch, do not put words in my mouth is what I want to say. I'm biting my tongue because we all decided, ain't nobody snitching, nothing like that. We came to one agreement, and we stuck by it to this day. And according to me, that's what happened. So she was like, yeah, you guys went out trying to drink some kava, get a little loopy. She's like, oh, you trying to get killed like that one student and all this stuff? And I bucked, and I was like, where were you at when AK fell down that mountain the other day? I was like, it took us 2 hours to get down that hill, and you were nowhere to be found. But we go out for like 30 minutes, and you gonna treat us like this? And she pulled a frick, like, it's like a rhetorical tool or something, like ad hominem or something. She's like, you might want to lower your tone if you don't want to be on the next plane tomorrow. Mind you, we're leaving in like 2 or 3 days. Bitch, they're not about to put me on a plane for tomorrow. They're going to come extract me from the jungle. This is not Survivor. This is some college student study abroad shit. And you getting called on your bullshit. So I went quiet because I'm looking at Brandon and this other nigga, and they ain't saying shit. They're just nodding, and they know not to play into it, but they know me, like, I get all emotional and upset and shit. I'm gonna stand my ground. So we go to sleep that night, and the next day I get Nala to come up to the faculty. And so she comes down from the mission, and we're in like the driveway from the road. And Nala's telling her, I know my people, and like I'm the village elder. They would tell me if somebody was in the village last night. And this faculty lady tells her, Fat Kathy tells her, well, I don't know what he's told you, but his friends already confessed. And so he's been lying to you. And I was like, what are you talking about? I haven't been lying. I'm not lying. I would not lie to Nala. Like, she's telling you the truth. She's got nothing to lose except for her word. And Fat Kathy just walks back up to the mission, and Nala starts walking me down the driveway towards the road, and I just start breaking down crying because I was actually supposed to be, after that Fiji trip, going to a leadership conference in Switzerland, and I needed to get scholarships to make it there, and I'm doing this over this crappy internet from the Fijian jungle that I only get for like 15 minutes a day if I want to pay, $10 for 30 minutes or something. And so I was just distraught, and Nala starts rubbing my back and kind of holding me up, because when I cry like that, like I start kind of collapsing, like somebody got shot and it was a cousin of mine, you know what I'm saying? Like, that black cry, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I started doing that. She's like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And I knew it was kind of like, you got to be a man right now, too. Like, you got to man up, toughen up. I don't need you crying in my arms and shit. Like, we walking through my village, and I go, so I straightened out real quick, and I didn't even think I had that in me, but I did. And she brought me to a neighboring house to the mission. I'd never kind of really noticed, but I guess I passed it all the time on my runs. And there was actually a horse that lived over there. So I don't know if that was one of their horses that died, but the horse that lived over there would always be staring at me while I ran. And it freaked me out because sometimes he'd be really close to the road. Sometimes he wouldn't be close to the road. So I'd be like kind of on edge right at the start of my run and get my little adrenaline jumping. But we went in there, and her sister was sitting on the floor, and I guess some doctors had taken off a mass or something off her spine, because a bunch of people would show up at the mission, like boats. Just there would be like a certain Wednesday where like a boat would show up in the bay, and all these people would get off, all these different wounds and tumors and cataracts and blind, and these doctors would just volunteer there and do all these surgeries freelance with no anesthesia or very minimal local anesthesia, and take care of these people. And her sister had been like walking a certain way because of this tumor or growth or something on her back, and finally got it fixed, but she was kind of recovering, so she was sitting on the floor, because that's how Fijians do. There's not furniture in their huts. And she rolled up something in a newspaper and they passed it to me, and they're like, smoke, and I'm like, I'm on a school trip, I can't. They're like, it's fine. Like, literally, they were just like, nigga, if you don't fucking smoke this shit, if anybody needs it with your anxious ass. And I did. I smoked with them. I don't know what I smoked, to be honest. It didn't smell like weed, but I don't know what the fuck it was, because they were very insistent that I smoke with them. And I did. Because when in Rome, you can't be doing that shit. If somebody offer you a glass of wine in Italy, you better drink it. If somebody asks you, offer you something to smoke in Fiji, you better smoke it. Given I knew her. So, ultimately, the next couple of days, the last remaining days, I go on my run, coming back the next day, and I'm passing the doctor's residence house. So I'm about 1/8 of a mile away from the mission. I'm finishing my run. I'm trying to finish strong. But I see the young faculty member running out towards me. And she's frantic, and there's this wild, crazy look in her eyes. And she's like, help, we need help. The kid passed out. And she's talking about the other faculty member's son, and their sons are the same age, but this kid is fragile, clearly. Like, it seems like they're allergic to everything. They wear glasses. They're constantly like on their electronic devices, very reclusive, not active, not very confident, things like that. And I see the older faculty member on the second story balcony running from room to room, screaming help frantically. And so I make an about face to go back to the doctor's residence. and I run as fast as I can, like an overdrive, like gazelle status. Like, I don't even know if it was as fast as I can. It was as efficiently as I could with wide strides. And I go there and I'm knocking on the door. No one's answering. And then I see the doctors down the road leaving the big hut where we eat by the water, running to the mission in a group, like a cartoon almost, like this mob. And they go get him, and by the time I walk back, I'm like hands on my hips, and everything has settled down. The dust has settled, and the Fijian girls are like, "You are fast, like you're strong, like wow." And that was really encouraging. That was nice, but I was like super like pumped up when I get into that fight or flight mode, and I'm glad it was fight. I'm glad I didn't like shut down. I don't know if it was fight or flight. I was think it was more so do what I got to do. And I know in emergency situations from being a lifeguard, and also working as a waiter, high stress, like having to make split decisions on the fly, rolling with the punches type thing. Like I did what I had to do, and it wasn't really to impress anybody, but it looked like those 3 weeks of running every day it paid off. And AK turned out to be okay after a couple of days from coming off the volcano. She started walking again. She had taken showers in a wheelchair, but it was probably a mental block is what, it's kind of the overall diagnosis is that she kind of went into a psychosis because maybe when she fell, her whole life flashed before her eyes and her worst fear had come true, even though she had started this trip, like when she was on that cliff in the beginning, trying to make sure she was not cowering away from her fears and living a life of adventure, even though it wasn't really her nature. And then the worst kind of happened. And you know what? We were there to help her. And I'm really glad it was me because that taught me a lot about myself and taught me a lot about others. And also taught me a lot about moving on and letting go. And one thing that a fraternity brother that had gone on this trip had told me before I'd ever gone, the hardest thing you are ever going to have to do on this trip is to say goodbye. That's what he told me. He had gone a year before me, and me and him had such an interesting relationship. I remember when we were pledging, 3 of our pledge brothers got kicked out of our pledge class for smoking weed, and I gave this speech like at our meeting. I was like, oh, I can't believe like the only other black guy got kicked out of this fraternity because it's a big deal for us to be in here. And then after the meeting, he's like, yo, like I'm black too. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I'm black. I had no idea. Really good looking guy, very light skin and great hair. And that's me being biased and judgmental and prejudiced because I did not know that. And he had told me, really studious cat, that the hardest part about that trip was going to be leaving. And the day that we were leaving corresponds with some type of Christian mystic calendar about the day of the Ascension. So maybe Catholicism. And so a lot of the people, the villagers, and Nala was processing from the village through our mission area onto by the school where there was another church. And they were celebrating the ascension of Christ into heaven. And that was the day that we were to fly off of the island into the sky. And a bunch of these like old Land Rovers and Jeeps and just trucks pulled up enough to carry 24 students and like 10 faculty members and their families and extract us from the Fijian jungle. And we're all standing out there with these locals that we had come to know and the doctors, and we're saying goodbye. And goodbye is something I don't think that it's a struggle. It's my time to cry. That's what it is. I cry when it's time to say goodbye, because I have had to and recognized prematurely before most people realize the weight of it ending that things are going to come to an end. And such as like in high school, my senior year, throughout that whole year, I started writing letters to people. And I would come home after work like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'd stay up for like an extra 15, 20 minutes and write these letters saying goodbye and thank you so much for your friendship because you made this last year of high school like the best year of my life. And I'd be crying, but I knew I couldn't knock it all out at the end, so I did it over the span of the year. And saying goodbye to these people one-on-one and giving them letters and coming back years later and some of them telling me they still have that letter is amazing. And I just know in my spirit and my soul, like, I have a tough time saying goodbye, and I think that I've loved very, very heavily in past lives, and I think that's why my soul desires that. But at the same time, I think this is a portioning, a rationing season for me this lifetime, because I cannot anticipate what a person that I feel like I'd be objectively drawn to for the rest of my life looks like, or smells like, or talks like, or speaks like, or thinks about. Like, because the dating scene has not been pleasant. But in any case, here's to trying. Better to have loved and lost than to never loved at all. I still agree with that, but damn, it hurts to lose. Damn. I didn't lose in Fiji. I gained so much, but saying goodbye to those people, to Nala, that was heavy. And for it to be the holiday, the day of the Ascension. So as the trucks start leaving, people pile in because everyone's so selfish. You know, they don't think about like, oh, what group am I going to be with for this 4-hour car ride through the jungle? We came in on like some old school buses, and now we're leaving in these little Jeeps or whatever. But nothing can go over 45 miles per hour. And that's probably because it was too treacherous for the buses, the roads. I end up in the back of a Land Rover with the guys that helped me carry AK down the mountain, Mustard, Antonio. And then the front seats are the faculty family, the standoffish Fat Kathy and her family. And we have to ride with them, but we get to the school, and the principal steps out of his home that's on the road. I never noticed that that's exactly where his front door is on the front road facing where the children sleep, and behind him the nursery where the babies and the nurses are there, and women with them, and his family living in that house. And you see these kids peeking their heads out, the ones that are awake, and his family, and I get out, and I thank him, and I wish him the best. But ultimately, like, it was pure gratitude, because he knows the likelihood of me coming back there is slim. Not impossible. Definitely not impossible. But I don't want to go empty-handed. And I don't want to come back empty-handed. And I mean that figuratively and literally. So I am preparing for that trip. And if you are interested in helping found that man's library and giving those kids near Vinu Levi, Savu Savu, Fiji, some books for their library, and the runoff from that, we'll go ahead and get a diagram blueprint drafted up of a kind of universal design and travel around the world and establish libraries. And it's called The Thread because we are weaving together the fabric of people's minds. I mean, that's what books are. They're the thread, the literal binding, the physical, tangible book is the needle breaking the barriers. The words inside of it, that's the thread, that's the color, that's the stitch binding these minds, your mind to someone else's. Dickens, Silverstein, who knows, y'all, like Morrison, come on, jeez, Whitman, Shakespeare, don't get me started. I don't even want to deal with Shakespeare. I'm so glad I didn't have to study too much Shakespeare in college. But ultimately, I don't think I studied any Shakespeare in college. Fiji was such a life-changing experience, and I keep up with AK on Instagram these days. And maybe she'll hear this, and if she wants her IG exploited, I can post it in the details of this episode. But I wanted to share about my experience in Fiji. I wanted to actually tell a story and not complain about my life. That's called changing the narrative. And no, I haven't been back to Fiji since. And, we drove out of there after saying goodbye to the principal. The faculty family was actually the first one. She was like, hey, actually, there's a free truck over there. You guys could ride there with them. So she was quick to get us niggas out the back of her ride. And it took me a while after getting in the new car, probably about half an hour riding through the bumpy jungle to where I finally just passed out after crying. And I'm glad my boys were in the back, and they kind of cuddled up with each other, and we just had this dynamic to where we all had each other's back and we understood, and they didn't give me any slack for crying like other people, because they had connected with those people as well. They saw them actually as people and not as islanders or Fijians. And I will say there was a missionary family there. They were white, and their son was probably like 2 or 3 when they got there. And that motherfucker was like Tarzan. His little ass had a machete. He was running around no shirt on, just some capri khakis or some shorts he had torn up. He was climbing palm trees. He was cracking open coconuts. Like, kid was straight up Fijian, and it was beautiful. And their daughter was engaged to a Fijian guy, a black guy. And, you just kind of, even as a black man, like, you're like, this is real. Like, if you teach people love, they will love. If you teach people hate, they hate. And I have definitely been shown hate, and I don't think maybe decompressed enough. So I was already cynical of the faculty. I was already cynical of everyone else on the trip that wasn't of color. I was already cynical of my college, because to me, no one had gone above and beyond to make me feel comfortable, when really that's what life is about. And doing that to the point where you were good with yourself. And I guess I was good with myself, and I think I challenged myself enough on that journey to leave an impression that I mattered, because ultimately that's what I wanted to do. On the paranormal tip, just to leave you guys with some spooky stuff, if you've ever listened to some of my spooky podcasts and my ghost stories, while we were there, Brandon and his girl and a couple of other people, there was actually a third faculty family, and she brought her son, and he was like college age, so they were just like straight up on Fijian vacation. And she was so chill. Like, she was a great median between the other two. Heavy set, like bigger than both of them, but like thinner in spirit. Like, she was literally like, she gave me life, girl. I love her. So, like, yeah, her son, he was there, and somebody did end up bringing edibles. It wasn't me, but someone had a chocolate bar there, which is probably not illegal. Like, it's chocolate, and if it's got weed in it, like, you can bring home kava. Like, you can bring home kava and have like a psychedelic trip at home if you go to Fiji and shit. Like, and you want to like do this. Actually, I should get some kava root. Oh fuck. Okay. Well, we know what the next podcast episode is. ER Hunter, aka Earth, on kava. Psychedelic Trip 101. And then we'll do 102, because I got a buddy that wants to do DMT with me. And we'll probably actually phone chat him and record that for another podcast here later. But anywho, yeah, guys, I'm super stoked. I'm going to wrap this up. I want to make sure I'm not leaving anything out. The ride home was like a breeze. No one got their luggage left, but we did the same thing. Like, went back from Venu Levi to Savu Savu, and then flew into LAX. And that plane ride from the first airport, which is super janky, like you literally watch this plane land right in front of you, and then you get on it, and you're like, yep. And it's painted in like Jamaican or like Fijian pride colors. And you're flying over the South Pacific, like Great Barrier Reef, all this coral reef. Like if you crash, like it's over. This is not some water landing. Like that's a foot deep water, and then there's coral reef. Like I was just snorkeling there. And one of the fun things about snorkeling in the Fijian South Pacific Bay Area, I didn't mention, was that on the weekends we would take trips away from the mission, and the people that founded the mission actually have like some resort properties. So we would go there, which was 3 miles away or 3 kilometers away from the bay that we were at. So it was around the island. So you go in the water in a boat, or you could kayak. But a kayak, like that trip, they actually only did once, and that was coming back. Like you had to be like signed up for it and like have a kayak. And the lady that runs it actually called me a bit of a pussy because I did not kayak back. But that is because when we got there, we had to hop off the boat a good 100 meters offshore because it was either low tide or high tide, but the coral reef would have been way too close to the boat, so it was probably low tide. And it didn't even seem like low tide, even if it was high tide on this beach. I mean, there wasn't much beach, so until you were at like the huts, but the huts were hoisted up on like balcony, like stilts, kind of like when you see pictures of Tahiti. But they were on the island, but you can tell like this thing was prepared for if the water rose, and it clearly has done that. So it was really tropical actually, because the coral reef right there was really deep and beautiful. And so we had to actually hop off the boat, and that's why we had to have so much snorkeling gear and like water shoes, things like that. And I remember jumping off the boat and snorkeling in and just seeing how deep this coral was, like meters deep. Like you could, if you took a deep breath, you could dive down and swim in between these crevices. Like it was one of those caves in Arizona, all curvy, like salt mine or some shit. But you wouldn't want to do that because everything in the water in the South Pacific is poisonous. So it's just like, this is beautiful. Like I'm stoked I'm doing it. Like I'm doing this, but I also want to get the fuck out of here. And while we were there, we were getting settled in. Like we made ourselves back, like we swam up to shore, but then we noticed there was a dock to the left where the boat was opposite along the beach. And some people, like Brandon's girl, swam out there, and he did, and some of my buddies were out there, so I decided to go out there while some of them were unpacking, settling in, things like that. And I'm snorkeling, going through this coral, but then I come out to open water because it's like probably a good 12-15 meters of open water between the dock and, because the dock's just chained, it's chained to some anchor that's probably like 30, 40, 50 meters deep in the ocean right there. And so that dock just kind of floats and lets you know, okay, this is an establishment or something like that. Like this is where people swim. But when I got past the coral reef and I'm like in open water, I felt like I was like in a Finding Nemo movie, Pixar or something. It was all like blue hue and white around me. The sunlight that's streaming in like moves and like starts to get like blocked out, like there's a shadow moving through it, and it's big enough to block out all the sunlight. And I go into like this shadow of the sunlight, and I kind of realize like, one, I am swimming in open South Pacific water, and two, there is something either the size of me or bigger swimming and can definitely see me, and is telling me that it can see me, in my opinion. And it didn't look like a shark. I remember seeing the silhouette, but I also don't know because it was so, the visibility wasn't there. Like it was so muggy because that's how it is under the water. And I remember getting on the dock and I was speechless, and people were like just laughing, playing, jumping. And I'm like, oh my God. And then when people were like, okay, it's time to go in, like I kind of made sure I went in between the time when like some of my friends went in and the last ones weren't going to go in. Like I wanted to be right in the middle. Yeah, so that was pretty freaky. And while we were there, Seawall was there. He came over there, and there was these fish that would jump out the water. They literally jump out of the water and skip across the water on the shore. And even while you're kayaking sometimes, which happened to me, he caught one in his bare hands. Seawall just caught it along the beach and like just threw it back in the water like a fucking Nerf ball. He was amazing. Like he's an awesome man, and I pray he's doing so well and just living life. And he teaches me, like that's living example of how to live. And like Anthony Bourdain, like I guess maybe that's why we're all enthused by what he did. And I do want to do that. I also want to figure out who I am. And so I guess I'm doing that on this podcast, and I need to tell some stories to figure that out, because we're going to navigate this thing together. So I want to thank you for listening. I know it was kind of random, but we're going to tie the knot up right here, because we are ringing the toll bell on how much data I want on my fucking GarageBand. Okay. Peace, y'all. Bye. So I really hope you guys enjoyed the show and my story about my experience in Fiji. July 27, 2019, there's a members-only show. I will be getting interviewed by Tony Merkel. And so I just really appreciate you all listening. And hopefully this burned off a couple of hours of maybe a monotonous day for you, and maybe enlighten you to somebody else's experience, because that's what I enjoy listening to. In any case, really grateful for everything. Check me out, erhunter.squarespace.com. You can email me earthnpo, as in earth without the A, NPO as in nonprofit organization, at outlook.com. And we're going to build the thread and start getting books to places where children don't have any. This is the place where dreams come true, the potosphere. In any case, I really appreciate you all, and I'm going to sign off. I'm going to take my dog for a walk, because he's been a really good boy throughout this whole thing. Ciao, ragazzi.